Hello and welcome back to Count Her In. We are super excited and honored to have Katrin and Aleksandra here today. They are both the co-founders of Frich, and we're super excited to dive into their entrepreneurial journey. For our audio listeners, they both are stunning people, so we are super excited to just have the opportunity to chat with them today. Let's get started with Katrin. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having us. Super excited for that.
Yeah, doing well. It's morning in New York, so super fun way of starting my Monday.
Love it. Yeah, so to just get us started today, we know it's Monday, it's getting a little winter cold, like today in Shanghai, all of a sudden it hit like 6 degrees Celsius, which being from Hong Kong, I was not ready for. I was living hot girl summer to its last day, so that kind of hit me hard today. But with that in mind, what are you bringing to the table today, Aleksandra?
Oh, I mean, figuratively, I'm drinking or I guess like literally, I'm drinking vitamin C because New York had the same like sudden super cold weather. And I remember actually when I lived in Shanghai, I thought it was gonna be like hot all the time. And then like November came and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, what?
Go and buy a coat. This is not okay.
Exactly.
But I mean, like, I don't really know if I would like jump into like the big like figurative things I bring to the table. I feel like we can like kind of pick them out during the conversation. But within Frich, I am the CPO, so I take care of anything product related. My day kind of goes through talking to developers and designers, talking to all of our customers and trying to figure out how do we solve the problem that we're solving with Frich and how do we do it in the most seamless and functional way possible.
Love it. What about you, Katrin?
Well, I'm literally bringing to the table a really strong Weber coffee that's hitting me hard right now. But a little bit more figuratively, I would say, I don't know, I would love to just speak really honestly about entrepreneurship and kind of the challenges and wins and losses we've had with Alex in the past year. Because again, I think a lot of those podcasts only focus on the highlights. So I hope to bring like a more honest perspective to everything.
I love it. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to get into it.
And Ali, what are you bringing to the table today?
Today, in honor of Weilyn, I am bringing an idea of being gentle to yourself. I think as entrepreneurs, you're always so hard on yourself. You always expect so much. The bar is so high, your expectations, the pressure. And sometimes that can get a lot and it can be really overwhelming, especially when you're always comparing against yourself and you can always do more. So the last few days, I've been very gentle and kind to myself, and it's been so rewarding from the inside out. And literally, I am bringing a big iconic water bottle that's like 2 liters, Taobao. Can't complain. It's fantastic. Okay, let's end it off with you, Weilyn. What are you bringing to the table today?
Amazing. I ran to the dining hall right before this call and I made myself like an oatmeal bowl, which was fantastic. So I munched that down before we started the podcast. And then figuratively, I hope to bring a sense of small moments of joy. I think it's really important to be grateful for the small things that happen every day. Sometimes at college, it can get like really hectic and like all of your thoughts surround like the next big exam or the next big like stressor. So definitely trying to complain less about the big things and appreciate the small things. But I would love to get started and hop right into your entrepreneurial journey. Could you give me kind of like the inklings of where you found your entrepreneurial spirit? And let's start with Katrin.
Yeah, well, I think I was, as a kid, already pretty entrepreneurial. I remember when I was like 8 years old and I wanted to start what now would be like Uber Eats on my home street without having any cooking skills or knowing how to drive. So I don't know, I really wanted always to start my own company. And, of course, there are many things that didn't work out. I had my, I would say, first serious experience when I was starting an app called Model Club, where I was there from the very beginning. So it was an app for models and influencers, and we really took it from idea stage to this really being one of the most widely used apps within the industry.
Oh, wow.
And I think with all of those projects, whether they fail or end up succeeding, you always kind of learn bits and pieces along the way. But definitely with Frich, once we got started with Aleksandra, this has been like a journey like no other. There's a difference whether you approach something as like a side hustle or a project, or you're like, okay, we're all in, we're gonna make our living out of that. So yeah, I would say, I think it's been like the most exciting journey of my life, but definitely also the most challenging year of my life as well.
I mean, I can just kind of piggyback on that. I think most of like my university years and even before that, I would always be the type of person that has like 5,000 side hustles going on like at every single moment. And I think it just like kind of teaches you really great organizational skills and just like the will to like pick things up. And then if something fails, you're like, okay, whatever, like I'll just pass on and just, this was kind of cool. I learned this and that. And then you move on and you're like, okay, like maybe I can try something differently this time. But I think it was also just kind of the mental like decision, like very intentional decision to be like, okay, like this time it's more than just a side hustle, it's just actually going to be my job, like my source of income. And giving that kind of like mental push to yourself and just making that like really tricky decision and committing to it. That's when I guess you become like quote unquote like entrepreneur, right? But I mean, like I feel like anyone who is the type of person that has so many side hustles going on, they already kind of exhibit those features or whatever it is, the kind of inner burn that you don't really want to work for someone else. You're like a self-starter. You're like kind of annoyed by following someone else's directions all the time. So if you kind of pick the one that like really, really sparks your attention and sparks your excitement, I guess that's the time you commit.
I like what you guys both said about kind of going all in as well, because I think a lot of people have a lot of side hustles or things they kind of do, but you don't feel that emotionally invested because you're not that financially invested, right? Because like if it's like, oh, like the stakes aren't that high, if it doesn't work out, it's fine, I still have my main thing. Or if it goes, it's easy to say like, oh, if this blows up, I'll quit my job. It's harder to say it's not going well, but I'm still going to quit my main job. And I think that's so cool how you guys kind of took that leap. And I'm curious to hear first from Aleksandra, what was that like and how did you make that decision from transitioning from maybe more of a stable income or stable job to saying like, I'm going all in Fitch, and why did you make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like a very weird time in my life because everything changed. I graduated, I moved to New York. There was so many things changing in my life and I was like, you know what, like what's just another commitment? Like it's already so much, like everything is already like falling apart and changing so rapidly. And I was like, you know what, it's just a new beginning. Everything else has ended. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys like have ever heard of it or felt it, but I feel like when you move to a new place, and you've moved so many times in your lives too, you just kind of come in and you have these high hopes and you actually like, this is like your excuse to make big commitments and statements. So I guess like I graduated, I moved, and then I was like, you know what? I'm also going to start my own company and it's going to be my only source of income. So it just all kind of like snowballed into it. And I was like, okay, this is going to be challenging, but it's going to be great.
I love it. What about you, Katrin?
I would have to say it was pretty terrifying. So we started like really like taking Frich serious, I would say like in January when we incorporated. And it was May when we both graduated, and I also quit my like kind of full-time job at that point. And that was really terrifying because we had just started fundraising. We had raised a small check, which was just kind of the emergency money, like not to like, like not to die somewhere. And then I just remember like that moment when we like realized that, oh my God, now we're all in, like this is happening. And it was like before launch, before we had, a product ready, we had like customers, like it felt like we had been working on it for a while, but I felt we didn't really have anything like to show yet. So it was scary, but at the same time, like my parents were asking me like, are you sure that you want to be doing this? Like, they're like, do you know what you're doing? But I really think that to do something well in the startup world or any business, like you need to go all in, like you need to kind of have your like skin in the game, because I think so many people love having an idea or a project, but like it really is going to happen when you're going to be all in, like you're 110% of the time, like you're fully committed, and you need to have like enough fear and drive to have the motivation to, make the most of it. I think because we were so pushed, like there was no way we could have failed with it because we put all our bets on Frich. And I really think that's what pushed us to make a lot of progress in the last 6 months. Like I'm sure if we had like cushy tech job somewhere else in another company, this would have never ever happened.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
so basically just be like genuinely terrified. That's the only way.
I love that. No, that's so important. Got to do something that scares you every day. And I guess if you continue to do that, something amazing is going to happen.
Yeah. It's so cool that you use that fear of like, okay, like this is my full-time job to like make something come to like full fruition as well. For our audience who don't know what Frich is, I'd love to give like a rundown of what it is, how the idea kind of started.
So actually, the idea for Frich came really randomly. We were walking around Central Park with Aleksandra during COVID, being quite bored and like finally wanted to start. We were just listing a bunch of different things that we think young people struggle with, and like where us as, young people as well could really help and build a company. And like we had a bunch of things in the list, but somehow personal finance ended up being on top of the list. Kind of summer and early fall, just like exploring like what are some problems that young people have. And really it all came down to social life and like spending excessively a lot on social life, whether it's, like drinks out, taking an Uber to a restaurant, dining out and ordering seamless coffee, like all the fun stuff. And we tried like a bunch of different finance apps, and really none of them worked because I feel like none of them really understood like first that money is inherently social when you're young. So, peer pressure and your friends are really going to influence your spending. And another thing was that they were all like pretty boring. There was like no point to really like stick to the app, and like it was just kind of made money even more intimidating than it already is. So we just wanted to create something better. And we had before use different fitness apps or like weight loss apps where me and Alex would like religiously send each other like meals or workouts or weight or anything like that. And really why those apps work is because there's social accountability, right? Like there's someone you don't want to let down. It's the same if you're going to have like a gym buddy or like a study group for an exam. So we really wanted to bring the social accountability into personal finances. And we realized that, the only way to bring that in is by bringing in your friends and like the people you actually spend money with. So Frich right now is a social finance app for Gen Z. We're really focused on helping young people develop better spending habits and doing so by setting goals together with friends and keep each other accountable. So as a Frich user, you can either challenge your friends to spend less money on coffee, spend less money on drinks outside. And as a reward, right now we have different Uber and Starbucks coupons, but we're actually working on adding stock rewards and even NFTs as rewards. So, at that point, by sticking to your goals, you're actually building wealth together with friends.
I love that concept. Finance can be a pretty taboo topic, especially among like friends. How are you kind of like mitigating that taboo?
I mean, I think this is like the biggest kind of drive for us, right? Like it is a taboo topic, and it really shouldn't be, because your finances decide so many things about your life. It's like one of the most important things. It will change how your life is going to go. It brings so much stress on you. It can affect so many relationships you have in your life. So the fact that we're so scared to talk about it, in my opinion, is just not right. So that's kind of our bigger kind of mission here that we're trying to solve. I mean, we don't really care. Like we can be the thing you blame for having to start the conversation about how your friends are pressuring you to spend money on things that you don't really feel comfortable spending on. Or if you need an excuse to bring up this conversation, we're more than happy for Frich to be that. So this is generally the biggest mission here, that we really just want to open up this conversation. And to be totally honest with you, I mean, we started just barely a year ago, not even. And I think this is going to be the biggest struggle we'll have like throughout the entire lifetime of Frich. It's such a touchy subject. We just have to find the perfect balance of how much you feel comfortable sharing, but then again, like you as a user have to feel challenged. You have to challenge yourself, but you don't want to get too intimidated. You don't want to give up. So we're basically trying to become behavioral scientists. If you would see what's next to my bed, it's just a pile of books about behavior change and how to change your habits. So I'm just trying to turn back time and change my major, and wish I became a behavioral scientist so I could help people out with this. But it's a work in progress. Like I don't have an answer. And that's what we're doing with these focus groups. We're talking to people every single day, watching their behavior on the app, trying to figure out why they're telling us one thing, but then they're doing something completely different when they're on their own with the app. So great question. I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, I love that idea though, because Weilyn just completely, she put it perfectly. Like it's such a touchy topic to talk about money, especially at college. people come from different places in the world, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ways people talked about money. Some parents were very open, some parents never talked about money. And then to have all these kids from around the world studying different things with different money relationships with money, all go hang out and get dinner. Like, let me tell you, I went to dinner with the 8 friends. Do you know how difficult it was? Not because of paying the bill. Sure, that's logistically annoying, but WeChat and Alipay helps. Just like to find a good place, a place someone feels comfortable with. Don't want to pressure someone to spend too much money, but you don't want to also be that person that's like, oh, I don't want to be the one who doesn't go in and get the drink when everyone's getting, like, it's complicated. So how is Frich helping to solve this problem?
Yeah, so, we're definitely still in the progress of figuring that out, but kind of, first to add a little bit more into like how we're approaching the touchy topic of money. So instead of seeing your friend's progress in dollar amounts, you're actually seeing that in percentages, which kind of, shows the progress where they are currently in their budget. But it's not going to put the dollar amount to it, because I think that can be really, really touchy, because as you mentioned, people have a really different like socioeconomic background, and you don't want to be pushing that. But definitely something we're seeing in the early days is that people are very interested in community. So not social just as friends, but kind of benchmarking yourself to people who have a similar background. Like, how are they spending? Like, what's a normal way to spend, even like with the money that I have right now, or what's a normal way to invest or save? And how can you benchmark yourself maybe against your campus, or like against any type of community that you feel that you're part of? So that's something really interesting. We've been figuring out that people maybe don't want to share their information, but they want to have access to the information and be able to kind of be part of like a bigger community and benchmark themselves, against others. So that's been like a really, really interesting learning experience we've had. But I have to say about peer pressure, it definitely is a really, really hard thing to solve. I strongly believe that bringing like kind of more light to those conversations and like talking to people about it definitely helps, because what I've noticed is like now that, we're building Frich and we're having more open conversations, like everybody's broke, like almost everybody's broke, like in a college. And it's often a weird situation where nobody can actually afford that expensive dinner or those drinks or those Ubers or whatever. But like everyone, meets together and pretends like they can. So definitely it might not work when there's someone who's, significantly wealthier than, the rest of the group. But I think there are a lot of situations where Frich works where just people haven't talked before and they haven't expressed that actually none of them can like afford the lifestyle they're all pretending to live. So I think that's a problem we can solve with our app.
I really love this idea that you guys have taken that's not like a monetary value, but like a percentage of how much people are spending, because I can even see myself like with friends, sometimes like going for restaurants or like going to eat out, and being able to like check, okay, like where are they at in terms of spending, and then being more like aware of that and making plans and just being like more conscious of like where their budget is, where my budget is, without going into like, oh, I only have like $100 left or $50 left. So I really love that approach. And then also another thing that I love about Frich is like this idea of being able to like benchmark yourself against other people. I think it's really hard as a college student to like know how to budget your money well, because you have people from so many different socioeconomic backgrounds. You have some people who like spend money like every single day on like food or coffee. And then you have some people who like rarely ever spend. So it's hard to like figure out like, okay, where do I fit? Like, what do I want to, like, how do I budget my money? So I love that idea. In terms of building Frich, what has been one of the like largest successes that you guys have, but also what has been like one really hard challenge that you guys had to kind of overcome? Aleksandra, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty common answer, and it just is true for every single part in your life. The hardest thing is to find a team. It doesn't matter like where in your life you're trying to do something, you're always looking for people to support you and do it with you. And because building a startup is so risky and it requires someone to basically drop everything and just 100% believe your vision and just build it with you, it's just so difficult to do it. Like what we kind of found useful is that when we try to look for people to join our team, we're looking through our friend circle, because you need that initial first step of trust, because you're going through basically war every single day. And everything is just going to go wrong, and you just kind of need to know that person's how they deal with failures, how they deal with stress, what is going to happen with them, how are they going to react if like something suddenly just comes completely out of the blue, and this is not something you can ask at an interview, right? Like Katrin and I did our first like interviews hiring other people, and it's weird, like you've never done that, you've been on the other side of the interview, but when you're the one trying to interview someone, basically asking them, are you going to wake up at 3 a.m. to help me fix something, like how do you ask that, right? So I think building the team has definitely been like the most excruciating process, just because you also put in like so much trust in these people, because the team in the beginning is so small, so that every single person genuinely counts so much. So I would say that's definitely like the hardest, but also at the same time the most rewarding thing, because once you like find these people, they become like your closest friends. You talk to them like every single minute of every single day. So I think that's definitely like one of the things that I feel like people should talk about the most, is finding your team, like especially the first like 10 people or 5 people. It's gonna make it or break it, like 100%, because it's not about like, you know, oh, is your idea going to be good? Like your idea is going to change all the time. Like our first ideas were so shitty, like I'm embarrassed to like show it to you. But it's the people that are going to be like, oh, that really, really sucked. Like, let's just do it again and it's going to be better. But for our biggest successes, I don't know, I think there's so many little things that just kind of like pile up, making you feel better. Like the moments when you see it out there and someone recognizes you and you're like, oh my God, I'm actually an entrepreneur. Like, you know, like I could be like listing you things like, oh, like it was great when we got the first check, or when we got like scouted by MasterCard, like that was super cool. But I think just like personally, just taking like those little wins when someone's like, you know, for example, like when you're interviewing someone and they show up in like a suit and you're like, oh, like they care so much. Like you're like, oh my God, like I'm actually a co-founder and someone is like stressed to meet me for an interview. Like that's kind of cool. Or when you like, I don't know, walk down the street and you like see someone using the app and you're like, oh my God, like that's so crazy. Like I made that and it's on someone's phone. So I think it's like those little personal wins that like, to me at least, count the most.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, also Alex's like small wins make me so emotional, because like it's been such a roller coaster. Well, I would have to say that like there were 2 main challenges I think we faced in the early days. One was definitely finding tech talent with like no money, because you know, people like who are developers already, they have so many options out there and the salaries are insane, and before raising we couldn't really offer them much, so we wanted someone who would join basically like first time entrepreneurs with no money, no product, and who would join our team and dedicate themselves fully. So I think the moment we figured that part out, I think that was like a really major breaking point. And another part that for me personally, I think we did well in the end, but I didn't expect that fundraising is like a different job itself. Like, I don't know, I thought it's like you're going to talk to a couple of investors and someone's going to throw money at you. Like, it's not like this. It definitely would be if you've already raised money and, you know, if me and Alex in 5 years started another company, but doing it first time, being like, yeah, we're 2 girls starting our fintech company. Like, we don't have no experience in finance or tech, but we're doing something that was kind of, that was pretty brutal, I would say. But also, you know, once we've done it now once, I think the next round is definitely going to be easier. But yeah, with little successes, I would definitely agree with Alex. It's been like so many little things. I think something we've done really well is create hype around Frich. Like we have such a strong network of people supporting us. Like first we got really plugged into the NYU network or even our like personal network. So whenever we had like a small success, there were so many people like cheering on to us and sharing that. So I think that really helped us with our growth as well. And yeah, they're just like small moments. For example, like we couldn't get ourselves approved in the App Store for like a couple of weeks. We promised our investors that we're going to launch like June 15th, but we totally missed the fact that like App Store can take weeks to approve you, and there can be like really tiny things. So every time we would like submit the app and like wait for the feedback, and then there would be like another small thing why they rejected it. And it was actually like July 4th when we were celebrating the holiday, and we saw suddenly like it's got approved on the App Store. I don't know why, but it was such a major milestone. Like you feel like, okay, your baby's out there, it's real, it's happening. So I feel like personally that was like, I feel one of the biggest moments so far.
I love
Oh my gosh.
that.
First of all, I love the anecdotes and I love the stories. Like I can really hear the passion in both of you guys. And I think everyone to some degree is obviously passionate about what they do, but like from what I can hear from what you guys have shared, it's not only a problem that you guys face yourself, like being in college and like feeling that you went through this yourself, but also along the way, like it's your baby. It's something you guys are like raising together and she's so new, but she's also growing so quickly. I think it's so cool to look back and see how much you guys have grown in the last 6 months, 1 year, and especially with your team as well. Like I think Weilyn and I are in the same position. When we started the Entrepreneurs Network, we reached into our own network, kids that we went to school with and kids that we go to school with now. And like, that's really where it starts. Like you get your hype club. And I think that hype club is really important, again, for those small milestones to be like, yeah, you're doing it. You know, even like the repost, the tag on Instagram, like it means something. It really does. It is nice to go through and see that. So I guess if you see someone who's starting something, how would you best support someone? If like anyone listening right now, they have like a startup or an entrepreneur they want to support, as an entrepreneur, both of yourselves, from your perspective, what do you think is the best way to help support someone? Obviously, beyond being a user, being a consumer, being a customer, what's another way you can help support an entrepreneur?
I think the first thing I could do for them, if I am their target audience, I will answer any question they have regarding their product. Because especially if they are in the early days, you have to have as many conversations as possible. So someone is building something and they need a 24-year-old living in a big city, I can answer their questions about whatever their product is trying to solve. Because this is what happened for us with Frich. We were working on it during COVID on our computers, and until the day like App Store approved us, it was an idea that lived in our computers. Like there was like, you couldn't touch it, like you couldn't see it anywhere. It was just like in a computer. So having honest conversations, I think, yes, it's very, very important to have that hype club, but you also need someone to be honest with you. And if something isn't great or isn't going, you need that one person that's going to bite the bullet and tell you that, so you don't waste your time. And then just introduce you to people. So whatever you need, like, for example, like we just went through fundraising, so Katrin can tell you about it. No one's going to answer a cold email. You need to find someone that's going to like warmly introduce you to someone. So, and I think that stands true for like any single person you want to meet or get help with, especially in the early days. You want to like have an advisor or someone who's going to hold your hand and tell you, okay, this is how you incorporate a business. This is how you write a cap table. Like these are the things you need to know. This is how you answer this weird question someone emailed you. So giving those introductions, I think, is one of the, I guess, most genuinely helpful things you can do.
I honestly agree with everything that Alex said. Like, I definitely think getting like honest user feedback is super, super important. Like, I think friends often want to be nice to you and they just want to be like, yeah, we love it. But it's really helpful if you can actually give like, constructive criticism, because that's what you really need in the early days to iterate. And yeah, the same with introductions, obviously like, posting stuff on social media and like sharing, like that's an easiest thing everyone can do. But I think introductions, not only for investors, but maybe potential collaborations, being like, oh, I saw this other brand, maybe you guys could do something together, or like, oh, this is my friend, you could talk to if you want to get like some feedback for the app or any type of product you're doing. So I think just really trying to connect and like going past that, just like, reposting their like social media post on your story. And I think, if you have even like 20 of those, fans in your social circle, like that can really, really move you forward. Like if you have 20 people rooting for you, making those introductions, giving you feedback, like that's already pretty much enough. That's like all you need in the early days.
I love that. And I think that's such great advice, regardless of what industry people are trying to get into. Like, I think finding a mentor is so important, but also like like being able to network and get those warm introductions is so important as well. I'd love to ask a quick question about what it's been like kind of as females in the fintech space, especially you mentioned like you both didn't have backgrounds in finance and tech. Like, what has that process been like? And as someone who's really interested in like product management and like designing products, specifically for Aleksandra, how has that process been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can just talk a little bit more from my side, because if you like take Frich as an entity, I'm probably the person in the background just making sure everything works, and Katrin is kind of like quote unquote the face of it, because she's the one externally talking to people that are going to like give us money, give us exposure, do all the other things that we need. I would say the biggest struggle in our situation isn't the fact that we're women. That's definitely not in any way a deterrent to us. It's more the fact that we're first-time founders. Like, we need to build credibility from basically nothing. Someone's handing over their money to us, someone's joining our team and giving us their time, their brain power, their talent to build something. And we need to convince them that even though we've never done this before, we know what we're doing. And I think that's like the hardest thing to do. Also, the fact that we're both quite young, I think even if we tried to hide it, if you look at our faces, you can tell that we're quite young. So for example, for me, when my job kind of revolves around, you know, leading a team of developers who are like double my age, they're all men, and I just show up to this meeting and I'm like, okay, you got to do exactly what I tell you to do. It was a little bit of like a weird situation in the beginning, but I think, you know, at the end of the day, we're all people where you just build relationships, especially with our developer team. Like, you know, I talk to them more often than to my parents, my friends, or like my boyfriend. Like, they're my number one contact, right? And, you know, they're the ones, like, I pick up the phone in the morning, they're like, oh no, Alex, like, you sound a little bit sick. Did you have enough sleep? And I'm like, well, thank you, Abdullah. Actually, I am a little sick. And, you know, like, at the end of the day, they're just your team. So I think it's about the way you treat people and like the trust you build with them. And I think this is like the hardest thing to do, is like become a leader, right? Like, you're leading a team. But definitely, like, the first time I met them, it was a little bit strange. They were like, what is this 20-year-old doing? Like, why am I listening to what she has to say? So that's kind of like behind the scenes. I think for me, like, super honestly, like, my biggest struggle definitely is imposter syndrome. Like, I've never done this before. Like, I recently graduated, so I'm like, why do I have the power to lead like 10 people, right? Like, why should someone like trust what I'm saying? So I think that's something that you have to work on your own, on yourself, and just kind of, like you said in the beginning of the call, Alex, like, you know, being nice to yourself and you're like, oh my God, okay, maybe like I messed up, but someone has to do it. And like, no matter who did it, they would make mistakes. So I think definitely like the relationship with yourself is like the hardest one. But I'll let Katrin take over what it is being the most external person in the team.
I would say, like, I know there's been a lot of talks recently about, like, you know, women not being able to raise money and like kind of, you know, that we're obviously the minority. I would definitely like flip this thing around. I think, you know, like, us being probably like some very few women entrepreneurs in the fintech space, whenever we do an accelerator, we're like the only girls there. Honestly, I think it can be your benefit because you just kind of stand out, and like that's just kind of how it works. In the same way with like fundraising, I think there are now like a lot of like, you know, funds and like things that are only focused on kind of like minority, which for some weird reason women are in the minority there as well. So I think it actually is right now a really good time to build something, because people do want to support female entrepreneurs. And I feel like between women, I think there's more support from one another. Like, I think, you know, guys are maybe a little more competitive, but I feel like as female entrepreneurs, there are like podcasts like yours or like communities, you know, where people are really, really supportive. So I think that can always be a plus. And I don't know, personally, like with any conversations, like maybe also because I'm not really soft, I'm pretty tough. So maybe that's why I've never felt like someone disregarded me as a woman. But I have to say, us not having that like very nitty-gritty like fintech experience, like that was for me the toughest part in the beginning. So we did an accelerator together with MasterCard, like right when we just started, from like March to May. And that was like an intense 12-week fintech bootcamp. So we started and there were like 5 teams. everyone else was like, yeah, I've worked like 15 years in banks and in finance and private equity. And like, honestly, I didn't understand like 90% of like what we were even talking about during the first week. We talked about like, you know, fintech like regulations and banking and like compliance and like a lot of things that like we'd never directly worked with before. So that was really hard. Like that was like a massive learning curve. Like I remember every day my brain just felt it's gonna like explode with all the new information. But after we finished that, I feel we left the accelerator so much more confident. Like it was really like 12 weeks. And after 12 weeks, I was like, well, we know what we're doing. We know how fintech works. But I think like I would really, really recommend to anyone who can to do an accelerator in the beginning, because I think that can really at least give you confidence, you know, in what you're doing and give you like a group of supporters around you. So sorry, I kind of steered away from the woman question.
I love it though. I think it's so important to recognize like, hey, like I don't know a lot about this, but I want to get into the space and I can learn it. So kind of like circling back to what Aleksandra said at the beginning, where she was like, I don't know a lot about behavioral science, but I have like a big stack of books and I'm excited to learn about it. I think is the most important thing. When Ali and I started this podcast, we had never podcasted before. And so every single episode we were tweaking, we were learning, we were asking for mentorship. So I definitely resonate with that process as well, of just like learning something completely new and not being super afraid of it. As we begin to wrap up the podcast, we have a question that we love to ask our guests. We'll get started with Katrin, but 5 to 10 years from now, a young girl like comes to the table. What are you going to leave behind for her?
Wow, that's a hard question. Okay, that might come across a little cheesy, but I would really leave behind confidence. I think like being very confident about what you're doing, which even sometimes might not be the most optimal or realistic thing, like having kind of blind confidence and optimism, I think as an entrepreneur really gets you through, you know, like logically, like, you know, 99% of startups fail. And like logically, there are like so many safer ways to do, but I think you can always get the safe random job, right? But like you're kind of young once, and now is the moment to like fail and like try out new things. And like, you know, one of those is going to succeed eventually. So I would just go in with confidence and not be afraid to like kind of go all in your crazy idea, no matter what anyone else around you says.
Amazing. And what about you, Aleksandra?
Okay, confidence is a really good answer. I feel like I would, this is like so weird. I don't know how I would like lead that to someone. I would lead them a good co-founder, because I feel like this is like, if you decide to do it, like it's at least like a couple of years of your life and you don't want to do it alone. So having someone that you're willing and ready to do it with, like that's gonna like, that's the person who's going to inspire you. That's the person who's going to give you confidence. That's the person that's going to pick things up when you feel kind of low, and vice versa. So I don't know how single founders do it. It's kind of crazy to me. But I would leave them like one kind of support person, no matter what. I mean, ideally they would be like the co-founder person, but no matter what shape or form they come in, like one support person for them.
100% agree. With that in mind, I'm gonna do a pop. What are we grateful for today? I'm gonna throw that off to Weilyn. Weilyn, I am so grateful for you. Seriously, I started my first startup last year by myself, and it was really difficult. It's so difficult to be in something by yourself. Like it feels very lonely, but to be through this with Weilyn, have someone compliment me in such a way through both literally complimenting me like nice, but also complimenting me in the work you do, and like there's a good flow and a good gel when things are high. It just works. It's a yin and yang, and I'm so grateful for you, Weilyn. I really, really, really mean that. Seriously, like the best co-founder, honestly. A little co-founder appreciation day right now.
Wait, that's so cute. And like I'm so
we'll get a Zoom room. We'll get a Zoom room.
I know if I get started, I won't stop. But I definitely resonate with this idea of like, you know, you have like co-founders who click, and then you have co-founders who don't, and it's like sometimes it just feels like, you know, match made in heaven, and then sometimes it just like doesn't. So I definitely feel really lucky to have Ali on this journey with me. But for our audience who want to continue to follow your journeys and also Frich's journeys in the future, how can they go about doing that?
Wait, first, I really want to echo on the whole co-founder appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
I would never do this without Aleksandra, and I think co-founder is way more intense than getting into any marriage. Like it needs to be a perfect match. And I think we are, and I really think that's what drives Frich forward. So I think like that's one of the most important things when you're starting a company, to have the right person behind you and like together with you and like, you know, kind of on this crazy journey. But with Frich, feel free to download the app on the App Store, or we're also on Instagram, Frich Money, which is where we kind of have our most content going up on a daily basis about like personal finance tips or memes about being broke. So whatever works for you, go and follow us over there.
I love it. And with that, thank you so much for joining this podcast. We were super excited to continue to follow both of your journeys and use Frich. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And that wraps it up for today's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you learned a lot about Aleksandra and Katrin, as well as their honest perspectives on entrepreneurship.
Thank you to Stefanie and Weilyn as our podcast producers too.
Check out our past episodes and look out for our upcoming episodes featuring inspired female entrepreneurs on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this podcast now.
To stay updated and involved, join the Entrepreneurs Network community on our Instagram and LinkedIn, and get in touch with us to share your very own entrepreneurial journey.